you guys wanting to talk about unschooling? Introduction to unschooling?
Oh, sorry,
Hi again.
in here.
I remember you from last year. Hello.
Slow.
Are you hanging out, or you're just?
I
on the
actually
move?
have to go.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
You're Amy.
I'm Amy. We met last year.
Yeah, Julie. Nice
Yeah,
to see
Julie,
you.
right. Nice to see you again. Hi, everybody. So Anne wanted somebody to do an introduction to unschooling, and she kind of wanted it at the beginning, but it ended up being at the end. So she was hoping somebody would sort of talk about the difference between homeschooling versus unschooling versus radical unschooling versus why do people sometimes say self-directed learning or world schooling. Can I find out, is this recording me? She said something about that. It's weird though, it's right in my way. Hopefully that's okay. Can you guys tell me a little bit about why you're here, if that's what you want to talk about? My favorite thing is question and answer stuff. Like I can ramble on, and maybe you would like me to ramble on. But let's just, can you say like where you're from, what your relationship to unschooling is?
I'm Rosemary.
Okay.
I am a grandmother.
Okay.
That's why I'm here.
Great.
My grandchildren are unschooled. And my daughter Andrea Justice is a big fan of yours.
Oh, great.
She said, "You've got to catch her talk." I said, "I will."
Is she here, or did you bring
she's
the
here.
kids here? Okay.
She's, I think, helping with some other thing. I don't know what it
Okay.
is. But she couldn't come.
Okay.
She said, "Mom, you got to go."
You're the ambassador. Yeah. Okay.
So, and I'm very excited for what she's doing with the children. And of course, it's very different than how I grew up.
Yeah.
And it's very different than how she grew up, too.
Right.
So my husband and I are really just kind of soaking it all in and learning as much as we can about it, and getting on board with what they're doing with the grandkids. That's awesome.
I know. She's so I know.
That's amazing. That's amazing that you want to learn.
Oh, look, it's Jerry.
Yeah, we totally want to learn about it.
Hi, are you coming to this talk?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we have a celebrity here with us.
Where?
So that's why.
Okay, and how long have they been unschooling?
I believe it's been about 3 years.
Okay, so it's not a brand new
No,
thing
it's
to
not
you, but
brand
you're
new.
still learning,
Right.
as are we all.
Yeah, and so she has the 3 kids, they're 9, 7, and 5.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, with the first one, she wasn't at all sure, she, I think, basically thought it was going to be traditional, but the more she got into parenting and all that, the more she felt like, this isn't what I want for
The
my
more
child.
you learn,
And
yeah.
so, and it is very radical for me and my husband, because we're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And all the other grandparents are going, what?
Mm-hmm.
But I think, I feel very fortunate that I'm very close to my daughter and my son-in-law and our grandkids, of course. And I feel very blessed that I could be a part of the journey. So
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to, learn as much as we can and help them as much as we can.
Awesome. Are you coming to be with us?
Yeah, I'd like to be with that.
You have to, if you want to leave in the middle, you're loud, even if you're in front. I can't quite see you, but if you want to, hide back there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great little intro. How about you?
Hi, my name is Lucy. I live in Jersey City. I have 2 kids, 5 and a half and 2 and a half. I guess right now we're technically unschooling, but this is we're so little. So.
Is this your first conference?
Yes.
Okay.
My first one.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Not my first.
How about you?
My name is Shonda, and I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and I have a 4-year-old son, and we're unschooling. I think last year we attempted a little nursery program. It was, he went for a little bit, and it was...
He made it clear.
Yes, he made it clear, and I sat in on a few of them, and I said, no, this is going to work. So that was that. So we're doing this, and we've just been moving full steam ahead.
Nice, great.
My name is Dana. I currently live in Tennessee. I have 4 children, but 3 of them are grown, 19, 20, and 21. And they all went through public school, regretfully now. I also have a 4-year-old who we are unschooling, and that's...
And what's your level of understanding of unschooling?
It's pretty high, really, and I feel very, I'm on a lot of unschooling Facebook groups where people are very kind of insecure or how, and I feel really comfortable with it. I think like my daughter currently attends a little preschool 2 days a week, but it's Reggio Emilia. So it's very child-led, play-based, and that's been awesome. But that ends when she's 5, which will be next year. And I feel pretty good about it. Like she's very, like I said, my older kids all went through school. So by 4, they had all been to pre-K. And honestly, she is much more articulate, knowledgeable, mature than they were at that age, even like having gone to like an actual school program at 4. She's like adding and subtracting. I didn't teach her any of that. She just picked it up herself, and I'm like, wow, like really the difference between, some people give me crap about the unschooling thing, and I'm like, okay, seriously, my older kids actually went through the whole public school thing, and she really knows a lot more than they did at 4. And my girls did well in school, but my son always struggled in school, and he's 21 right now, and still, he has a high school diploma, but yeah, it didn't really help him to accomplish much. He's still trying to figure himself out, and I don't think college is going to be the way he chooses to go, and I really regret that I made him, especially him who didn't do well in school, and I was very brainwashed, so it was always like, you need to do better, and he's always in trouble, and I'm not doing that again. And my daughter's very spirited, and I don't think that she, just like my son, I don't feel that public school would be good for her emotionally or behaviorally either, so.
Don't even bother. How about you back there?
I have 7-year-old twin boys, and they're totally unschooled. My daughter was in school, and she asked me to pull her out at age 9. I wanted her to stay and finish the elementary, but I listened to her. Everyone said, don't let her choose. And it was the best thing I did. So now she's almost 11. I didn't have to deschool her. I don't teach her anything. She does her own thing. The boys are more difficult because, it's not on my end. See, I have my husband who's not on board with unschooling, so my one son sculpts all day, and he goes on YouTube and he makes little toys that cost like $3 each. Those little, and he's like perfected it too. I bought him the sharp tools, but that's my philosophy. That's his skill, but. So I have a little bit of a clash.
So there's like tension with your husband not thinking
it
counts.
Why are they reading yet? Like, in my mind, they are reading. They're reading little books. Maybe not the school standards. They're supposed to be reading chapter books now, according to the school. But I'm just happy that, if they see a sign one way, they're sounding it out, and they know a little bit. But so I have a little issue with that I'm unschooling them. But my husband's not home half the day. He just thinks they're doing nothing all day because I don't know what he wants, but that's my...
So this has been 2 years for you?
This is my 3rd year.
Okay.
Because the boys, I wasn't ever going to put them in school because I just said they're not going to sit. So I said no. And I was always planning on homeschooling Sarah in 6th grade, but then, like I said, I pulled out earlier, and then I was like, no, I'm doing anything, I don't want anything to look like school. So I went to unschooling now. And it's hard too because a lot of my friends is homeschooling. So they're talking about curriculum and they're like, what do you do? I'm like, I decide that morning what the kid says to me, and if I could get them, sometimes it's just you play a board game and then one kid's like, I'm making my own board game. And then, it just happens naturally.
Right. So we'll get back to some of those things. We're just kind of going around and getting a feel for how much people know already about unschooling and introducing ourselves. How about you?
Sure.
Just walk in.
I'm Jim.
Jim. Hi.
Some of the folks who I don't have kids.
You don't have kids?
No. So I'm here really to learn.
What's your understanding of unschooling like? Is this a brand new idea to you? Have you been...
I've been learning a little bit about it over the last year, and maybe a lot more about it over the last 4 or 5 months. Mainly reading websites and talking to parents and Facebook groups, trying to learn about it. I've got a background as an entrepreneur and web developer, so I have some idea maybe finding some way to help unschooling parents or the kids to do what they do better. And maybe by doing that, it would make it more accessible to other people. So I'm just here to learn and figure out
What's your own like personal, what's in it for you as far as like what's your drive to learn since you don't have kids, which is most people's reason?
Well, if there's a lot of problems in the world today, then you could try to go and solve one of those problems. Or you could go to the root of the problem, which might be education for the world. And if you can help solve that problem, then that makes some of those other problems easier to solve. So that's what's in it for me. If I'm going to have kids, I want my kids to be in an awesome world. So if we can, if you...
Great, that's a great answer. Good, thank you. How about you? Just a little bit about yourself and what you...
I'm Abigail. I was homeschooled half my life, but it was really unschooled, which I didn't know, because when I was in middle school and high school, my mom was like practically a single mom because my father was away, and so she would do internships with me, and so I would go to like the florist and stay there while she was working, and anything that I had a real interest in. So I kind of have, I understand unschooling from that perspective, just really focusing on kids' strengths and not their weaknesses. And my parents really didn't care about academics too much because I wasn't academic, and they were very, it was just great. I have 2 children now. I have this little lady, but then I have a 4-year-old. And my plan was always to homeschool, and but she's very strong-willed. So I'm like, well, this isn't going to really work. This is my perspective of unschooling. That's why I came, is to learn from other people and how they do it.
And how long, like, would you say you're new to the idea, like as a philosophy, is unschooling?
I think coming here, I've realized how extreme, like I was thinking more of unschooling, just following the interest of the child, but there's also, there's a lot of boundaries, because my own philosophy is I feel like kids need boundaries. Just, I'm Montessori, I really hone with their approach, but like I didn't realize the extremes.
So like this is your first conference with the word unschooling, and so you're still...
Yes, like I've
Okay.
read stuff on it, like I
Right.
listened to unschoolers on YouTube and stuff like that, but actually seeing people live it, and
Right.
they're, like, it's different than what I was expecting. It's very, like, I'm a freaking control freak, you know? Like, that's how
Right.
I
I
feel.
had to figure that out. I used to be one too with my older kids, like big time.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so I don't know what I think.
Okay, so
about
you're
it.
still learning for sure, right?
Yeah,
That's
definitely
great.
on the L.
Good. Well, we're all learning. How about you? Can you say a little bit, just, this is supposedly an introduction to unschooling. We can make it be whatever we want it to be, but I'm kind of trying to get a feel for how many people need an introduction and what level of, so what's your background and your current status?
We've been homeschooling for 6 years, and he wanted me to unschool, and I wasn't listening to him. So I come from formal, long years of formal, very
For how long? Like how old is...
28, I graduated. 29 from formal schooling. How old is the child?
Yeah.
Sorry, 7. He's 11 now, but we started when he was 5.
Okay.
And then the other one is 8, and he's never been in school. But,
Okay.
and I fight it. And part of me, I'm more open to unschooling now. I think I'm almost there, but it's taken
Yeah.
4 years. Poor kid.
We'll get back to that. That's a common experience, I think. How about you?
I have 3 kids, 2 boys, 10 and 8, and 5-year-old girl. And I always think that I've been like homeschooling for 2 years, but I think it's been 3. Like I'm trying to remember. My son says it's 3, so they're better remembering things.
Better at math.
They're better. So the way it happened for me was that I don't know, there was a series of events that led me to homeschooling. So when I was researching homeschooling, I came across unschooling 3 years ago, which was a very, very new idea to me, but very enticing. It almost just clicked immediately with me. So I started to research it before I took the kids out of school, especially the oldest because he was in second grade. So I read, a bit of John Holt and this and that, and I mean, whatever I could. Pam Larikia, from Toronto area, and that's where I went to speak to on her podcast. And so I very gradually, very, very slowly went from very mild type of curriculum, lots of limits, to kind of unschooling, and then going towards more of a radical unschooling in the past year, with still a bit of limits here and there, but moving slowly into that, doing a lot of work on me. And yeah.
Okay, that's great. How about you?
We're together.
Oh, okay. Family thing. Okay, cool. How about you, Jerry?
Well, you're not going to believe what I'm going to say.
Okay.
One of the connections that I have right now is I'm homeschooling this 4.5-year-old.
Oh, wow. I didn't see that coming.
Now, I know you didn't. And she's Nepalese, and her parents help me. They live in my house. It's a long story. In fact, I visited her and her mother this year when they took the summer off and went to Nepal, where the mother grew up. So I visited them in Nepal this summer. Didn't want to be without them for that long. I actually took her home from the hospital, so I've been helping to raise her. And trying to organize homeschoolers and unschoolers on Long Island, and it's incredibly difficult. Long Islanders, I run an organization that networks alternative schools all over the world. And before that, I ran a school that was really like a giant unschool for 17 years, so that's my background. And one of the things I do is an online course that helps people start new alternative schools and homeschool resource centers. And later today I'm going to do a presentation on how to start a homeschool resource center. But on Long Island, it's amazing. People go there because of the good schools. And when I was a kid, I went to those schools and I consider them that they are, what I said was they're the best schools of a failed system. They're the ones that do the highest on those tests. We wondered where the other 95% was. But it's the old paradigm. And so, but when I try to organize people on Long Island, people write to me. I get hundreds of people contacting me all the time. If they don't say their name, I know they're from Long Island. They're afraid to go outside the norm. But right now, I'm homeschooling her. So that picture was actually at the Hall of Science on Long Island. And then last week and then this week, we went to the zoo, the Queen Zoo. And tomorrow we're going to join some homeschoolers on a nature walk at Sagamore Hill. And so that's really why I'm here.
Cool. That's great.
Jerry Mintz?
Yeah, he sure is.
An email.
Yeah.
Everybody in the world.
Has he? I'm going to just give you a little bit of my background, and then we'll talk sort of about the different labels, and then we can just, I think, have a question and answer. I came at unschooling in a really unusual way. I've learned over the years as I've talked to many unschoolers. I started off very traditional. My kids were in school, small private schools. I did the whole thing that I regret of fighting about homework and fighting about bedtimes and all that stuff, which I can get into a little bit more. But what I had when my kids were about these ages, sort of like I found myself a single mom with no college degree, no job really, but I had been doing a bunch of little things. I'd run a daycare at my house, I'd run a preschool at my house, I was a professional organizer, I had done workshops, so I learned how to make a website, and I called myself a happiness consultant, and just started charging for all these things under this umbrella of happiness consultant. So I was doing that for a couple of years when my little 8-year-old came home, my youngest, who was just known for being cheerful. And in such a cheerful little pixie voice, she said, "Oh, I just love it when the school bell rings and another day of torture is over." And I thought, and here I am like going around giving workshops to adults and having all these clients. How do I be happy, or how do I, sort of like what you're talking about, this world, you know? And when this light bulb was just like, what a hypocrite. Like, how can I be letting my kids have a life of torture while I help adults recover from their lives of torture? So I knew that homeschooling was a legal option, but I thought you had to do math and science and report to the state and all that stuff. And in Pennsylvania, you sort of do. But I was just prepared to like lie to the state. I was like, I'm gonna do my own thing called happiness homeschooling. And if my kids grow up not knowing how to read and not knowing math and not knowing how to earn more than minimum wage, at least they'll know how to be happy. This was my idea. So they got to stay home from school. Every morning we'd have little cuddles and talk about happiness and what would make you happy today. And it was happiness homeschooling. And one day we were on a little field trip on a bus with a bunch of sort of alternative thinkers. It wasn't a homeschooling thing, but the old man, who now know is like, really goes way back in Bob Kay, do you know him from the old days? He was sitting next to me, and I told him we were doing happiness homeschooling. And I didn't really like talking about this too much because I was pretty sure it was illegal. But somehow this came out, and he says, "It sounds like you're unschooling." And I never heard that word before, and I was like, that does sound right, doesn't it? I ran home and looked up the word unschooling and was so relieved to find out that millions, or at least hundreds of thousands of people were either doing this or had done this, that they had grown up to be productive adults that had actual jobs. Lots of them went to college and knew how to read. And so then I became an unschooler. So I had thought that I was doing this wacko thing that nobody had ever done. And so coming from that perspective, it was actually, in a way, for a lot of people, unschooling is pushing them, whereas I was like sort of relaxing into, oh, phew, the path has already been paved for me. I still had a lot of deschooling to do because it's not just about learning, and it's not just about happiness, but it's like about how you relate to young people. Like, you just don't realize how much you think that old people know better than young people, and that I automatically do know how often you're supposed to shower and when you're supposed to go to bed. Like, it just takes a while to realize how many preconceived notions that we have that we know better than them because we're older. And so there was a lot, I mean, like when I think back on, some of you have mentioned this, kind of the ones that have older kids who maybe found unschooling later in life, and like, part of what makes it so hard to learn is you have to feel that owie feeling of realizing what we're doing it so badly before. You know, it's just like, I still, even though I have this great relationship with these great 20-something-year-old kids, if I think of what I was like when they were little, it hurts my heart. You know, it's just like, you can never just be like, oh well, no regrets. It's like, no regrets. I have them.
Yeah, me too.
Lots and lots of them. Part of that, like allowing myself to have regrets, helps me keep being better and better. It's like it pushes me forward to I don't want to have those regrets. Yeah, I mean, you know, these people that go around saying, oh, I'm a person who has no regrets. I'm like, well, it wasn't not nice, lucky you. But for me, it's just like knowing that feeling of having made mistakes that I wish I hadn't made, I think propels me forward in my own relationship with my kids, in my own wanting to keep learning, in being somewhere like here, and just helping people see, like, no, really, you could even be better. Like, no, really, it'll feel even better the more you get it, you know? Don't just stay somewhere where it's sort of okay, and you're, like, when I was doing a really bad job in my world, everyone else thought I was this great parent, you know, like, my kids were all well-dressed, and they had clean rooms, and they were polite, and, oh, if only I could be such a great parent. So that was me being a great parent, is what I now regret. So that I can know that no matter how great I think I'm doing now, probably if I keep learning and growing, I'm going to see things that I wish I'd done better. That's just part of the wrestling of learning, is being willing to kind of feel like, oh, I didn't get that right before. So that's kind of how my life learning process has been for me.
Believe it or not, Bob Kay calls me all the time now.
Oh, I totally believe it.
He'll call me up and say, did you read the Times today? I think I'm going to go jump off a bridge.
He's another guy like Jerry. He was one of the old-time I think he was part of one of the team that made homeschooling legal in Pennsylvania way back in the day. He doesn't do very much about like email or Facebook. He's like, he photocopies things and sends them to you in the mail. Yeah. Okay, so that's sort of my background. Also, just a little plug. Mostly, I can shamelessly plug my podcast because it's not me. It's all these amazing voices out in the world. I interviewed unschoolers from around the world and made a podcast called The Unschooling Life. If you search the word unschooling on iTunes, it's usually the first thing that comes up because it has the word unschooling in the title.
And it's fabulous if you haven't listened.
And some people think
I listen over and over and over. They're like more than 50.
Yeah, there's like
something.
53 of
They
them or something.
are
They're about 20
amazing.
minutes long.
Wow.
And I actually, that was like a healing experience for me again, because there were so many times I'd be listening to this with parents of 5-year-olds and 2-year-olds and just cry and just be like, why couldn't that be me, you know? And, but and also my kids are on there, and so it's just never too late to keep learning. And to me, one of the things why I like to tell the story of how it all started is it's like unschooling is so very connected to being human and being happy. You know, it's not just an educational system. It's like a way of thinking about human beings. How do human beings get born into the world? What is the best way to treat these new people as they learn how to be people? Like what? And so I have lots of adult clients as a happiness consultant. I have other podcasts with just adults who are sending their kids to school. Nothing in their minds to do with unschooling, but almost all of them like listening to this unschooling podcast, even if they don't have kids, because talking about unschooling is really talking about life. It's talking about what makes you happy. How do you decide to live your life when you wake up in the morning? And these are questions that all 7 billion of us could be asking on the planet. It's not just about what's the best educational process for my child. And from that point of view, one of the things Anne had specifically wanted me to talk about in this was like the difference between unschooling and radical unschooling, because a lot of people hear those terms and wonder what's the difference. And I think really the unschooling is when you're looking at it as an educational system, which it probably is the best. It's at least on par with the free school educational system. If you're just thinking of how do people learn the best, unschooling or self-directed learning is like, all the studies about education say that this is how people learn. They follow their interests. They remember the things that they're interested in. Radical unschoolers take it to the next step where they're like, this isn't just about the best educational system. This is about life. This is about all of their relationships. This is about all their choices that they'll ever make in their life, not just about learning. So that's kind of a broad way to kind of distinguish them. Some people don't like the term radical unschooling because, well, for one thing, unschooling is radical enough. The last thing they want is to be like, I'm even more radical than that, you know. Sandra Dodd talks about like a radius from the sun, you know, like a radical in the way of like, you take that principle and it just beams out into every part of your life. It doesn't have to mean that you're even more crazy than the crazy people. Although in a world that's this crazy, I'm perfectly happy to be really, really crazy.
I've got one question about that.
Okay.
It's interesting because I haven't really thought about that, the difference, but I see certain differences. And one of the problems, I think, for everybody who's trying to do this, not everybody, most people, is that they haven't grown up that way. So on a gut level, something's always telling them, no, that's not the way to do it. Oh, no, it has to be forced. You know, oh no, they're not going to be natural learners. You know, there's something in us because of the way we grew up and we're trained that's going to always, and it happens to me too, even though I demonstrate stuff all over the world, I'm always blindsided by how powerful it is. You know, it's amazing. But when you say radical unschooling, it makes me think that I've seen, well, let me just back up just a little bit. So that's the problem that we all have. Now, we can either let that pull us back or might possibly overcompensate in the other direction. And I think that to try to fight against that background, we might just sort of think, well, a kid should be able to just do everything to the point where you don't defend your own rights as a person. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I say this a lot to clients. So one of the things I do is people call me in to get help when they're either stuck in life or specifically in unschooling in other areas. And that is a big, one of the main themes of especially new unschoolers, but even just finding your way. It's like you want to throw everything away and then you're kind of left with nothing. And you think you have to do whatever your child wants you to do. And again, it's because if we weren't raised this way, we just don't have the tools. Our brains are a little bit broken. Our instincts aren't all the way like human in a way. We've been dehumanized in a way. That's kind of a strong way to put it, but I think that's true. That's kind of what schooling does to us. So our guts you can't just always follow your gut, because sometimes your gut, like you said, just has this gut reaction, but you have to make your kid. And sometimes your gut might just be like, everything I think is wrong, because you're trying so hard to not be the other kind of gut reaction. This is why things online, books, conferences can help you fine-tune, work on your radar, because you're not going to your radar isn't going to be 100% reliable. And it's like, unless you just happen to be one of these really rare lucky people who thinks about this before they have a child, which is a really good time to think about, because then you can practice and learn, and you're not risking somebody's life as you're floundering around. But this is, it's kind of like, I often, this is one of the deschooling process is for your children to kind of undo the damage maybe that school did. But for you as a parent, a lot of times people go way over here. They think they just have to let their kids be up all night, even though everybody's crying and sick all the time. We just have to let them eat sugar all day long because this is what radical unschoolers do. We just have to not have a conversation. Like a lot of parents will just be like, I don't even want to, I'm barely talking. They're watching TV and I'm not even going to interrupt them because I don't want to wreck it, To learn that you are actually part of the family system, and your husband or your wife and grandma's even part of it. This is a whole system. And this is one of the pros of having something like a democratic school, where you're not just floundering all by yourself. There's a little bit of checks and balances, because it's a community that's kind of working together and has processes for doing that. In a family, you don't necessarily know if you're doing anything right at all. Am I doing it way too much this way? Am I doing it way too much this way? So it's a trap. If you're feeling especially another thing is that if you're overcompensating by just saying, okay, no, what I want doesn't matter anymore, because everything I want is so stupid that I'm just going to do whatever they want. 6 months later, a couple of years later, it's kind of this nightmare where you've let yourself be whittled away to nothing, and it's like you have to send your kid to school before you end up in an insane asylum, because this is not working either. And especially it can cause, trouble in marriages. It can cause parents, grandparents to not want to have anything to do with you. It's not, and this is one of the other things I say a lot, is that people think especially if they go from homeschooling to unschooling. Homeschooling is hard. You have to sit your kid down, and they don't really want to take the test, and then you have to make them finish a thing, and so then they start being an unschooler and like, wow, this is going to be way easier. I don't have to do all that stuff. It's not just not doing all that stuff. You start to slowly realize, unschooling is doing a lot. It's just not doing all the things you thought you were supposed to be doing, but staying engaged and saying the truth about your own discomfort and wrestling through really tricky things about this kid wants this and this kid wants this and they're both impossible, and then there's this other thing, we don't have the money. There's a lot that you're doing as an unschooler. It's not doing stuff. That's another way that people sometimes just be like, well, great, this is so easy. I don't have to do anything. And then it's like, you have to do a lot as an unschooler. And a lot of times I thought once I unschooled, everything was going to be so easy and joyful. I read these stories online about how everybody's having, it's just that is kind of true. There's a lot more joy to be had in an unschooling life, but it is way more confronting. You're dealing with this every day. You don't have the luxury of sending them off and being like, well, until 4 o'clock, I don't have to think about them. You don't have to look at yourself and see all the weird things that are going inside your feelings about that TV show that you don't know whether or not you should be letting them watch. But that is the process of unschooling. That's especially for people who are taking unschooling not just as a learning thing, but as a life thing. That's a lifelong process. That's why I'm still in this process, even though my kids are all graduated from college and in their 20s. I saw a hand up over there.
So one thing I wonder about a lot is the language side of it. You've got radical unschooling, you've got homeschooling, you've got self-directed learning, you've got liberated learners, you've got world schooling. And so one piece that seems to be is that the word unschooling, a little bit radical unschooling, in some ways it might push people away because it makes them like, ooh, that's, if the goal is that lots and lots of people would do this, then like the language kind of might make people like, ooh, I don't want to do that, that sounds like it's not for me. And then like the word unschooling is kind of saying what you're not instead of what you are doing. And the thing about homeschooling is that doesn't say what you're doing, it says where you're doing it. And then even like the world schooling, I got to talk to some of the kids who say, well, I'm not unschooled, I'm world schooled. Like, okay, well, it's good to have your niche, but in some ways the more you go in, like are these words making things inclusive and unifying people, or are they kind of excluding or kind of putting, the Sudbury students, so when the kid says, oh, I was unschooled and now I'm stopping and going to Sudbury. Like, okay, well, from everything you're saying to me, you still basically have the same philosophy and thing, but what you can still come to conference, right? You're still allowed. So that's something I kind of see from the outside that's, to learn about it is more challenging, because you're like, oh, what's radical, what's regular? And it seems like there are no real firm rules.
Well, the thing about that is that words don't mean anything. In other words, they only mean something in context. So that words take on a meaning by how they're used. And so there's no absolutes about that. The person who came up with the term unschooling was John Holt. And, so he was reacting to the fact that before that he'd been an advocate of schools and trying to change schools. And then he gave up on it and wrote Teach Your Own. And then he came up with this concept of unschooling. And I remember asking him about some of the people who were doing school at home, and what about that? And he said, well, those kids will teach the parents how to teach them, or they'll give up and just put their kids in a school.
Yeah, I think that the thing about words don't mean anything except for just what you mean, what you try to, or you're trying to communicate. I just saw this great little chart. It's like things I think, but a bubble. Things I say, things people hear, things people understand. It's just like that's true of anything. And unschooling, as we probably all know, is like a hard thing to grasp. You can't just say, here's a word, and now they're going to know what you mean. And one of the reasons I like it so if you say unschooling to somebody who thinks schooling is good, it's going to sound like a bad thing. But if you're talking to somebody who's like feeling traumatized by schooling, that's all you want to know is that it's that thing. And like in sports, if I play volleyball, and if I spike somebody and it goes on the ground, I schooled them. That's not necessarily what you want to be doing to a little kid, is like schooled. It's like, so there's some ways where the of that thing, unless you really value schooling, and if you really value schooling, you're probably not going to take to unschooling.
In England, they don't use the word homeschooling. They say home educated.
Home educated, yeah. So I think part of what's interesting about the word is that it invites, if there's any room for inquiry, it invites inquiry, and that the conversation is more important than getting the word exactly right. There's downsides to kind of any sort of way of saying it, because you can't summarize like a whole entire different paradigm than the way you think human beings, That's like a lot.
Yeah, to trump that, I was asking, they had a panel, the panel was called Unschoolers Don't Blow Up When They Turn 18. And one of the things that came up was that, okay, if you're a high school student, the moment you walk across the stage, you're no longer a high school student. College student, the moment so with unschooling, when do you suddenly not consider yourself an unschooler? And they convinced me that I'm an unschooler myself. I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe I have been for the last 8 years. But when do you not become, that kind of thing.
Well, if you think 5,000 years ago, and people were hunting and gathering, and nobody was being schooled, they didn't have to call them unschooled. They were just living. you know? But we sort of have to define something because most people think from the ages of 5 to 18 you're doing a thing, and it has to have a name, so we call it unschooling. But like if you're less than 5, like people here that have kids under 5, they're like, I guess we're kind of unschooling, but it doesn't really make sense. And if you're over 18, you're like, I sort of feel like an unschooler, but it doesn't really make sense. But it's just what you're trying to say is, I'm trying to live a life that's full of passion and curiosity and learning. The only reason we need a word for it at all is because it's illegal to just not do something educationally for your child in most places in that age group, so we make up names for it.
I think the concept that helps, what I often say is there are 2 basic paradigms. One is that people need to be forced to learn, and kids need to be forced to learn because they're naturally lazy. And the other one is that kids are natural learners, and people are natural learners. If you believe that people are natural learners, that's how you live. And you have to do things completely differently than the way they do it in school.
Yeah.
Those things actually tend to lead people away from themselves. The more you follow what you're told to do, the less you know what you want to do.
So I guess good time, for more questions or thoughts or looking for new words to talk about it. I think that even though, words matter a lot, especially when you're trying to explain to your mom why your child doesn't read yet when they're 9, or whatever it is that happens to be your thing. Words can help if you can help find language for what's going on.
I came a little late, I'm sorry.
No, that's
something
welcome.
that already was discussed, but it was mentioned before. My question is I'm actually one of those parents with 2 little kids who are not yet
Right.
because that's what kids do. They play, right? But how do you defeat those demons that you have within you? Like, I know about deschooling for parents, and I heard someone say that basically you're supposed to take a month of deschooling for every year you were in school. So for me, that's quite a lot.
Years.
And I guess I still have some time to do that with my kids, but at the same time, is that like really the only way to go for me to get rid of okay, I'm not doing it right. And I used to be a teacher, so that's like bonus right there. So
Bonus.
that's a whole lot of, of like, let's sit down and learn instead of go and you're getting it. I don't know where you got it from, but you're getting it.
It does help when your kids start like you see all of a sudden they know the capital of something and you never told them. Like when you start seeing that it happened, it can really help a lot. Oh wow, I don't know when they started reading that video game, but now they're reading it.
And for me, some of it too was seeing the different ways that she is picking stuff up. Like I mentioned before, my daughter's 4 and she's adding and subtracting some things. She got that from a tablecloth that I bought off Amazon. Like it was a cool, just whimsical tablecloth that I bought that had that had like just different fun, seasons and weather and money and just that. And she like picked it up from that. Or she can count by 10s to 100. She got that from a CD I picked up at Goodwill. Like when you realize that there's so many more ways to pick things up and that none of what she learned, I think she knows more than a lot of kids that are in pre-K and kindergarten. I didn't teach her any of it.
Yeah.
Like we're not doing flashcards, we're not doing worksheets, we're not doing any of that stuff, but like she's picking it up from the world around her and I'm going, well, unschooling works. Like I see it every day.
Well, my twins are 7 and they're only just starting ed now, but, we came from where my daughter was different. My daughter learned a lot, but my son's on a gymnastic team and they do flips and one reads music and does piano, so I'm trying to nurture like the sculpturing and the art.
Yeah, those are like real
But
skills too.
when I'm around parents, they're like, oh, my kid could read already, and my kid, then I start feeling like crap.
Yeah.
Because then I'm like, well, my kids are talented too. My son looks and sees my passcode, or says, that's Christine's car, and I'm looking at it going, how do you know that? And he sees some little detail in someone else's car that I don't even pay attention to. So I'm like, all right, well, they're smart on their own level.
Yeah.
This is why we need friends and conferences and things to remember.
But
Yeah.
I'm at the point now, like Dr. shoot me down right now, but I don't care what any kid does.
Me
I
neither.
don't care. Like, good for you, your kid reads. I mean, I hear parents say their kid reads up when they're age 4 and they do nothing. Well, my kids don't. And I am sitting with them a little bit because I got pressure from my husband, but I know that physically they're not ready yet, and they were all grade twins. You know, and like, in the end, who cares? You know, like,
Don't get it.
don't care.
When I went actually to one of Jerry's conferences a couple years ago, there was a neuroscience PhD student who had done research on the way that we learn. She wasn't an unschooler, she wasn't a parent, but she just was talking about the research that she'd done. And she was she didn't quite realize the audience she was talking to. She was trying to convince us that it's perfectly normal if your child does not read until they're 9 or 10 or 11 or even 13 years old. She was like, the part of the big problem in school is like that if you don't read by 6 or 7 or something, you're already behind. And it's completely counter to what what is normal human behavior. And we just kept being like, we know. But it's really nice to have a neuroscience student,
I wish
PhD
that stuff
student,
would be more
trying to convince
available.
us of this.
Why isn't that knowledge like more readily available?
It's weird how public schools, and Jerry can speak to this, but the school system is so broken. It
Because
just doesn't matter how much research there
That's
is.
where my son went.
It's one size fits all.
Yeah,
You know? But
and that's-
it's interesting. There was, it just got canceled unfortunately, but every year I usually go to the modern school reunion. And it was supposed to be in New Jersey this Saturday, and they got it, the date, the venue messed up. But modern school goes back to the beginning of the 1900s. And it was really like an unschooled program. People actually lived in a community in Stoughton, New Jersey, and the whole community was that way. In the school, in non-compulsory classes, you didn't have to learn to read. And I would go to the reunions, and I would meet people. Now, I met the guy who was running the whole thing. He talked about how his mother learned to read when she was 3. He didn't learn till he was 8. Well, he's a retired professor at SUNY now, you know. But I met another guy who didn't learn to read till he was 10, and I met his mother who was a teacher there. And she told the story about how he came to her one day when he was 10 and said he wanted her to buy this book. And he said, well, why should I buy a book for you? You don't know how to read. He said, okay, I'll learn how to read that book. So he wound up becoming a pediatrician. And then I met another guy who didn't learn how to read till he was 9. He became a psychiatrist. So, you know, so this is the modern school people is an amazing resource to find out that yes, this works, and here's you have their whole lifetimes, and you can see.
Yeah. And I want to go back to your thing about that feeling, like when am I going to feel like I'm doing it right? And like I said before, I have clients and listeners, and I'm involved with all kinds of parents, not just unschooling parents. No parent anywhere that I've ever met thinks they're doing it right. Like, the one good thing about sending your kid to school is that, like, well, if I'm not doing it right, at least it's sort of somebody else's fault a little bit. But parents never feel like they're doing it right. This is part of the thing. So part of it is just like giving yourself a little bit like, they're there. You know, I know how much you love your child and how much you wish you could feel confident that you're doing it right. And I have kids who are all like, I always joke that they were bringing shame on our unschooling family by all going to college and getting 4.0s and master's degrees. I'm like, you're not supposed to do this when you're an unschooler.
No.
But like, they're all very successful, and we have really good relationships. And I still like worry every day, like, what if my daughter broke her hand the other day playing volleyball, and I was like, I should have been there to help. It's just like, we can't not blame ourselves. I don't know why. If there was a way that I could figure out how to just make us relax and know that every little thing's going to be all right, it would help. But part of it, a lot of it is just be willing to engage in these kinds of conversations and find people, if it's online or in books, on podcasts, that are saying things that are resonating for you. That's a big part of it. Yeah, go.
I'll tell you the volleyball thing.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, I was with my parents and I hurt my hand. And they're like, oh, what happened? And I was like, oh, I'm learning to skateboard. And I hurt my hand. And they looked at me. And what do you mean? You're learning to skateboard? You know, what? I'm like, that's why I don't tell you guys things. I don't have this conversation. So the question I have is, In your experience, you talked to a lot of parents that are unschooling, and I make an assumption that you've talked to a lot that are thinking about it. What, in your perspective, do you see is kind of this thing that gets them on the fence, and they're not sure, and then finally makes it possible for them? Or what do you see as that? There's a lot of parents in here that it seems like are contemplating unschooling here. So what do you think is that piece that says, okay?
Yeah, I think it's probably different for everyone as we're learning. Like everybody learned to read in different ways. Maybe it was a tablecloth or a book, or so I don't think there's a way. But I think one of the things that is the most heartwarming, I think, and the most like encouraging is meeting grown unschoolers or listening to them. It's when I have a whole series of podcasts that are just me talking to my kids. And it's just about like life, but to like hear somebody who was not forced to do something, like my son who's now 28 and an engineer and a farmer and a musician and all these things, but from like ages 13 to 18 mostly just hated me and played video games. Like that was mostly what he did. He sometimes wrote music, and that was his sort of whole deschooling. And like that's a really hard time to deschool is when you have like, you don't start when they're little, you start when they're entering that age where everybody's going to hate them anyway because they're an annoying teenager, and then just let them be an annoying teenager year after year after year. And now he's like a Buddhist and a yoga teacher and a health food guy and so what was I getting at?
Seeing the proof or talking to
Yeah,
them.
being able to see that really, like every little thing is going to turn out all right. That these human beings, and this goes back to what I was saying in the very, very beginning, that unschooling is about redefining what you think it means to be a human being. And like that are human beings born with everything they need within them, and that this interesting being is going to unfold and learn what it needs to learn and express what it needs to express, and it's just going to turn into, like it's going to be a little baby sycamore tree, and then without us doing very much, except for just letting it, it's going to grow into a big sycamore tree, and it's going to be maybe a different shape than that sycamore tree, but if we were grown thinking, only if you do this will the sycamore tree turn out to be a sycamore tree. You know, it's just like stressful to sort of think you have to.
Just relating to that and responding to something you said before, it might not just be months.
I know, I heard that same thing with the month and the year of school, but it took years for us. And it was years before I could see the proof, but it wasn't years before it was obvious that this was the only right way for us. You know, even if it was just that my son is angry and traumatized by school and it's going to take a long time to sort of un-traumatize himself, that there was no better way. You know, it's like not that fun or easy right now, and other people looking in might think we're doing a bad job, but there was enough confidence, like, how else can I honor this actual human being? Not like an extension of me that's meant to make me look good, not like it's supposed to turn out some kind of way. And this goes back to your question too, like when people are considering unschooling, a lot of times people come to the consideration of unschooling knowing that the ways that everything is going right now isn't working. So like school, either their kids are in school and it's not working, or they themselves had a terrible time at school, or they look at this crazy world and they're like, something's not working. So they come up to unschooling being like, that way doesn't work. But then when you tell them the new way, they're like, yeah.
It's a reaction to something.
Yeah. You know, it's like just to be able to be like, to really be confident that the old way, like that's how it was for me anyway. It was just like, well, I'm not positive this is better, but I am positive that that is not good. So I'm going to do another version of bad if that's all that this is. Like maybe unschooling is bad, but they'll just turn out to at least have different problems than everybody else, and maybe it'll all balance out. I don't think there's any one thing that helps people over that, but I always encourage people to find a grown unschooler and talk to them. And to hear, like even Jerry is still inspired after 50 years of these reunions to meet all these people who didn't learn to read till they were 10 years old and became scientists, you know, or whatever it is. And my kids too, I was positive that unschooling would not turn out scientists. Like I was like, well, and I was kind of mathy growing up, but I was like, well, I really don't think anyone becomes mathy without like the incentive of getting good grades or wanting to earn a lot of money. Like all of my kids turned out to be, after years of not making them do math. And it wasn't like, oh, look, my child is learning math ahead of time. Nothing like that. And then when they were like 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, all of a sudden, all three of them at different times and for different reasons, started being like, oh my gosh, do you know how cool genetics is? Like, they all know so much more math and science than I do now. And just because they think it's so cool. Now, I did not see that coming for the first 20 years. So, like you said, it's not necessarily months before you're like, oh, phew, they all have degrees in the sciences. You know, it's just not that easy.
So what you're saying is like just very comforting, right? Like it's just amazing. But then there are times where, you know, you see sometimes it says, okay, so this is a list of what it means to be a good unschooling parent. And I look at the list and I'm like, oh my gosh.
There's a list?
Yeah,
Where's the list? Where's the list?
for example, what's something that's on that list in your mind?
Oh my gosh. I try to avoid the list.
Things like enthusiastic about life, curious.
Yes, resourceful,
creative,
you know, kind of
patient.
just, you know, all these things. And I did kind of went through that list, and I always feel like I'm short of something, that I'm not the best unschooling parent, that there are parents who are better than I am, because I fall short in so many years because of school, actually, because it messed me up so bad that I just don't even know how to learn, really, or just, you know, trying to unlearn and relearn and, you know, doing all these things, and so...
Well, one of the things, and I do think there is sort of a list, not really in that same way, but like there are qualities that would, and I would say it makes a good unschooling parent. It also just makes for a happier person, a healthier person, a better life, like that kind of stuff. So if you see a list or you have this thought like, oh no, I'm not a creative enough person, rather than thinking to yourself, well, therefore I'm a bad unschooler, or this is going to fail, or I have to try and make my kid into a better creative person. It is an interesting opportunity, and I think that this is something that's really lucky for unschooling parents, that schooling parents don't really have to do. It's like, you have to keep working on yourself. It's like, I wish I was, like one of the things is like active. Well, I'm lazy, I don't want to. So what would be one thing that I could do that would help me be more active? Like, that's not such a bad project to give yourself.
I guess it pushes, it challenges you, right?
It's like motivation to be the person that would actually be enjoying life more. You know, it's like, if you think of it like how to avoid failure, it's not such an inspiring motivation. But if you think of it like, this is something I could learn more about. Like, and I had such an insight in like my mid-30s when I suddenly became a good speller. Like I thought if you weren't a good speller by the time you were 9, it was too late for you. Like you didn't learn spelling. I failed I got C, it was the only great thing I got C's in. When autocorrect started happening, or like the red squiggles and stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad speller, I don't want anyone. And then one day I just realized that like I'd written this long thing and there weren't any red underlines, you know, it was just like, it's never too late to learn a new thing, you know, and if your new thing is spelling, or if your new thing is being active or being creative or being excited about life. Like, I know my dad, who was just a regular old curmudgeon going to work all his life, and oh boy, it's even better now.
Oh my God.
Gotta figure this one out.
That's a good look.
He was just, I didn't know, you know, there's a lot to say about my dad, but he wasn't a very happy person. And when he was about 70, my parents were divorced for like 30 years. When he was about 70, 65 or something, he decided to remarry my mom and be freaking happy. You know, it's like, it's not too late to just get over yourself and try something new, you know.
I also think there's something too to be said for, if you believe in the philosophy of unschooling, that learning happens everywhere in all things, then it takes some of the pressure off. Like, there are days where I am that awesome unschooling parent. We go do all this stuff. We're out in the creek. We're creek stomping. We're at the library. We're doing this. There's days we don't get out of our pajamas, and she plays by herself all day, and I'm on business phone calls, and that's that. But like, that's learning too. Like, they're different, you know, like we don't do anything. Some days we do absolutely nothing.
Do you have a more specific, like, I'm not being a good unschooler because
Well,
of this smoking?
specifically, I think it's because I do have this blockage in my brain that
What shape does it take? What form does this blockage?
it's just kind of like, it's like I want to learn new things in a way, but it's like I'm learning new things all the time. Like I am, but it's just and I was specifically, let's say math, right, technology, science. These are things that I would need to learn because I struggled with math because of the way it was presented to me in school, and so I have this thing in my brain that I'm like, I can't learn it. I just can't. And I'm trying, but I'm like, I can't. I have this idea of like I make it so hard to learn that I can't learn it.
Is there something you need to learn math for? Is that?
I think not really, and yes, because I think for my own, kind of, I want to get it. It's just like I want to get it. Sometimes I was thinking that because I want to do this for my kids, let's say they ask me a question, and I'll be like, I don't know, right?
So I
Or
think
just
maybe what
an
you're
example
describing.
to them also, that
What was the last thing you said?
just to be an example, like I want to maybe do it because I want to be an example that you can actually learn something that you think that you were never able to learn. And so these would be my...
Well, here, there's a couple ways I want to answer this question. One is you don't have to learn any math ever. Like, you really don't. Probably you have money in your bank account somehow and you generally know that it's there and you don't overspend too much, maybe. But so you probably already know as much math as you need to learn. If you spend the next 10 years not learning any math, you'd be fine. And your kids either will or won't become interested in math, and they will find people that know about it if it's not you. So that's one way to answer the question. But it also sounds like you're describing a specific thing that a lot of people are plagued with, which is a disease called math anxiety.
My 1:30
Okay,
workshop.
it was great to have you here.
Very enjoyable.
Oh, good. Math phobia or math anxiety is like a huge thing. And so maybe you just don't want to have such anxiety about it, you know?
Yes.
And not because you're supposed to be, as long as you don't like somehow push it onto your kids, they're not going to have that. So you don't have to be like, if I don't heal my math anxiety, I mean, there's lots of traumas that we as adults maybe have gone through, and it's really like, so say somebody was sexually assaulted. It's really hard not to like be like, I've got to make sure you're never sexually assaulted. But going around your whole life being like, I'm such a bad mom because I'm so afraid that they're going to be sexually assaulted because and just making it into this huge thing, like, isn't the way to go about having that be a healthy. So that's the same with math anxiety. Like, it's not actually the main or only thing about anybody's life is whether they do or don't know math. You might die not knowing math and still having math anxiety. Oh well, you probably had other things that were good about your life, let's hope. So, you know what, we all have our baggage. That might be your baggage. But also, if you just kind of gently talk to yourself about it as if it's just your own trauma that you're gentle with, not that you better hurry up because you're going to be a bad mom if you don't quickly fix it. Not only get over the anxiety, but then also learn a bunch of math. Like, that's like, if you could just have your main project be between now and like when you're 60 years old, is that you're just going to get over your math anxiety. And then when you're 60, maybe you'll start learning some math. Maybe that could be like a nice, gentle kind of process. In the meantime, your kids will probably be scientists like mine. I don't know what the heck they're talking about. Yeah.
So from listening to that, it sounds like math, or the fear of math, or the anxiety of math, is probably something that both parents that are worried or nervous about going on schooling have this big question mark. What will we do about math? And then even the parents that are unschooling still have this concern of, are we doing enough math? Are we like, is that...
It's just so a thing from schools. It's just 100% school invention.
So let me ask you this, right? I had this idea, which, well, when I was a little kid, there was a TV show called Square One that was aimed at probably early elementary school. And it was kind of like a sketch comedy show where you learn math. So it wasn't like Sesame Street, but you know, it was a little more, like, maybe Bill Nye, whatever you want to call it, right? So I watched the show as a kid willingly. I'd come home from school and I'd turn on the TV and I'd watch X-Men, Spider-Man and Square One. So I had this idea of doing some kind of a similar sketch comedy show, but geared more towards teens, so a little bit more grown. So I thought it was a really cool idea. So the question I have is, isn't doing something like that cool, but also making it seem like in order for math to be cool, you've got to coat it with sugar and fun, as opposed to the other way, which is like, you're just naturally going to learn it by doing things. What would your take? Or maybe it's not A versus B. I sometimes find myself stuck in a binary world of it's like this.
Yeah, I do appreciate though your concern or your like question, like, am I just trying to trick everybody into thinking I'm, we're unschooling because I make math so candy coated that then now my kids are doing something that really counts.
Like it's coercion, but I mean, it'd be fun. Like
I think about this a lot too.
Fun.
Yeah, just because I have so many like middle school age kids whose parents or they write to me and be like, how am I supposed to learn math? And so I'm always kind of like trying to think of fun ways to. But so I understand the concern. I think if it's fun for you to make a math thing, and some people think it's fun to do it with you, go for it. But I also think you could pretend there was no such thing as math until, for some reason, you or your child or anybody of any age wanted to learn math. Math is actually not very hard. So like I didn't do any. It's not very hard if you have the kind of brain that thinks it's fun, and if you have the kind of brain that thinks it's fun, you're the ones that are going to go on to do math and things. So if it's hard for you, just don't do it, because like the people who think reading's hard, when they grow up, they just don't read. They watch TV and they do their math, or whatever it is, you know. So I'll just tell you a couple of math stories from my own kids. So somewhere we talked about talked about how some people think they were unschoolers, but then they decided to go to Sudbury schools, so they're not unschoolers. I think of about the year 2001, we all started being unschoolers. But also, my kids sometimes wanted to go to school, sometimes they wanted to go to school for a week, sometimes they wanted to go to school for a year. They chose all kinds of stuff. I still just thought we were unschooling as a philosophy, even though a lot of times they were sitting in classes because that's what they wanted to do. So my youngest, who was the one who was, another day of torture is over. She's the cheerful little pixie girl, and she was also the one that got bad grades up until 3rd grade. So we unschooled. I didn't make her do anything except for happiness things. What would make you happy today? Happiness homeschooling. So that was 3rd grade. When she was about 14, which is kind of old to be a freshman, but we moved. Basically, I didn't know it, but 2 blocks away from a performing arts high school. So it was part of the Philadelphia public school system. It was free. It was like Fame, the TV show Fame. And she was a dancer, and she'd been doing dance for 8 years or whatever. So we were looking for new dance studios in Philly, and they were kind of expensive, and she used to have babysitting jobs that helped pay, but now she didn't have them. And so August 30th or something, she's like, I think I'd like to go try the performing arts school. Maybe I could get free dancing. Okay, you've had no writing, no reading, no math in the last 9 or 8 years. And in 2 weeks, you're going to start public school freshman. I was just like, okay. Just trying to put on my happy face. My main concern was like, not that she would do bad. It was just like, I didn't want her to feel bad about herself. Like to be like, Mom, everybody knows things, and I thought I was such this great person, and Mom is terrible. So I was just like, okay, we'll do. Oh, by the way, she was also signed up for Not Back to School Camp, which is a camp for people who don't go to, unschoolers. So she went to Not Back to School Camp first, and then started high school. And I just was like, you know what, you can do anything you want to do. You can drop out whenever you want. You want to go to school? Okay. So let's just, when you come home each day, we'll do your homework together. You don't have to tell people at school that you haven't done math since you were in 2nd grade. Just come home and we'll do it together. And she didn't know like what a number and a line and a number was, and I was just like, luckily she's my youngest, because I was like, if they find out, like, what is going to happen to me? We're going to be exposed. But the older 2 were kind of all on their way.
She didn't have trouble getting in?
She had to get in on her as doing a dance.
Just the dance, but not the academic. Okay.
I mean, we have, in Pennsylvania, you have to have like an evaluator, and so you have a little bit of like paperwork, so we sort of use this portfolio thing. She got in. And public school, I mean, it was a magnet school, so she had to be good at dancing, but she didn't have to be smart. I mean, like, partly in a way it was like, okay, this is the Philadelphia public school system. What do these kids know? I don't know. So she's definitely floundering. But like I said before, one of the things she has in her favor is she is super cheerful. And she's just in the school because she wants to be, sitting in the front row. I have no idea what's going on. They're saying numbers, and she brings it home, and she's like, well, this. And so she was like a little like, but she loved the dance and whatever. So about 2 months in, she's sort of getting a bit of a hang of it. This is Algebra 1. She's one thing that she did do, she learned how to do Rubik's Cube. Like that was one of her things that she wanted to do was Rubik's Cube. She knew how to do a Rubik's Cube. And she played the game Sudoku over and over. And it was like, well, you know, you're kind of maybe getting old for that being your only math. You know, I didn't say anything, that's what she did. So it's a little bit like number puzzles, algebra. I mean, I don't really know what was going on in the school, but I know she'd come home, she wouldn't know what was going on, we'd talk about it, she'd go back. 2 months later, around Thanksgiving, the math teacher pulled her aside, and she was a little bit like afraid, like why is she getting pulled aside? And the teacher said, would you like to move ahead to Algebra 2? It seems like maybe and she was like, no, I think I'm good where I am. But she was like doing well enough in the class and exhibiting enough curiosity and enthusiasm and engagement that it came across the teacher like she was way ahead, which was hilarious to us. This was our big unschooling joke. By like January, she actually was way ahead. She was just so far ahead that by like February and March, she started planning ahead. She wanted to do Algebra 2 and Geometry next year because she just knew one math class wasn't going to be enough. She wanted to have 2 math classes, and they were like, no, you can't do 2 classes. It won't work in the schedule. She had like 4 meetings with the principal to convince him to let her do 2 math classes in sophomore year because she liked it so much. So that took from like August when she didn't know anything to like February when she was ahead of everyone to like the following August where she was doing 2 math classes. And then eventually dropped out because she'd taken she was tired of dancing and had done all the math classes and wanted to go to community college to do more math classes. Did not see this coming, okay? This was not because I worked really hard to learn math and be a good example to her. It was just because we were sitting around having fun for like 6 years until her brain, something started going and something got interesting to her and it had turned out to be math. Like just coincidentally, it's a good story for unschoolers because we're all terrified about math. It could have been lions and tigers and bears. Who knows what could have been her passion. But now she's getting her degree in like biophysics. Or I don't even know what it is because I'm not a good role model. But she, so that's one math story.
That's fantastic.
My oldest, my angry son, who played video games from 13 to 18 or 19 years old.
I can't wait to hear this. Okay. I'm ready.
Smoked cigarettes, sold weed, like all the things you're terrified. Like, what if I just let my child, right? He did those things. Then he did and he was going to be like a poor musician. That was his big plan, or a comic strip. You know, I was like, all right, if you could figure it out. I just could picture that he was going to be living in my basement forever, and it was like, I brought him into the world. If this was his passion, I was going to support him in doing it, and I'll get therapy if it drives me crazy, because we gotta work this out. So when he was about 19, or 17-ish, he got a job at Starbucks, and he got minimum wage, but he just felt rich because he had this money, but he liked it. He didn't think the pumps should be in this order. He thought it was more efficient if things were over here. Starbucks, you're not allowed to rearrange it, corporate, you know. So he was like, who's corporate? How do you get to be corporate and decide like the system? He's like, well, they have college degrees. You know, it's like, they're not poor and starving musicians that get to make these big decisions. So it just got it in his mind. He was going to go to business school and become corporate Starbucks. This was his plan. I'm like, okay, he's done no high school math. He's just been a bad kid with an attitude, sitting around, sleeping in every day. But he wants to make a lot of money, so he decides he's going to apply to college, so he has to take SATs. Right, we live right near Temple Business School, which is a really good school. So I'm going to take the SATs. I'm going to study for the SATs, and I'm going to take them. So now he's got like a year before he wants to enter college, and he needs to take SATs. So he just starts looking online for practice SATs, and he doesn't know what trigonometry is, so he finds a book that tells him what trigonometry is. He got such good grades 6 months later on the SATs that he got a full scholarship. Did not see this coming. This was not because I was a good role model about math. This was because I let him be angry and in a bad mood and sell pot. I didn't really let him sell pot. There was a bit of a thing there. But that's just to say, like, it wasn't because I did a good job. It was because his brain, when it was ready, just so happened to have that kind of a brain. He then changed his major to engineering because he didn't actually care about money anymore. At some point, he got like all these awards, and then he didn't want to be an engineer either. So he did get a college degree. He learned a lot of math, and now he's like, I'm kind of done with math. I want to be a farmer. Now he's learning how to be a farmer. So just because he turns out to be this math guy doesn't mean he's always going to be a math guy. Doesn't mean he's going to ever earn a lot of money. But like that's just those are some math stories in case you think you're supposed to either do a really good job of teaching them math or do a really good job of not teaching them math. Just chill a little bit. Like if their brains are like that, their brains are like that. And if their brains aren't like that, their brains aren't like that. So either way, you don't have to squeeze so hard.
I worry. I feel like I'm damaged right now from my social
Me too.
media. And I don't want to damage them, right? Do no harm. Do they tell you? Do they give you feedback?
My kids?
Yeah. Do they say anything like,
Yeah.
oh, I liked what you did, or you messed me up real bad? Like, do they ever?
So I have another podcast. I have a podcast called The Unschooling Life, in case nobody didn't hear me say that. But I also have another podcast called Whatever, Amen, and that's about life. And I have like 9 different seasons of all different kinds of things. So my last season was just me interviewing my kids on different topics. And there's the one that made me cry the most is called Teens. And it's hard to say, there's no quick answer to like what, but you'll hear a lot of what they have to say on that podcast. There's a lot of stuff that was really hard for them. I mean, it's one of the things that Jonathan, that son, talks about on that podcast, and we've talked about it a lot, is just that like being a teenager is hard. No matter if your parents are great, no matter if you go to school, no matter if you're unschooled, it's a horrible, according to him. It's like really interesting to hear him talk about it. It's just a horrible time. Like you're not a child, you're not independent. Everybody in the world is suspicious of you. Like it's just you're going through all this love and hate and feelings in your body, and it's just like. And like, if you think that you're supposed to make it be fun to be a teenager, that might be too high expectation on yourself. It's hard. One of the things about listening to that podcast or just remembering that being a teenager is hard is like, oh, I'm not supposed to somehow fix the whole wide world so that being a teenager is fun. I just want you to feel like I'm on your team. And that's what it was like for me when he was being a bad kid. It was just like, I know this is kind of a shit show, but I just want him to feel like I'm on his team. And that was my whole kind of guiding light. And we'll just figure out the rest someday, somehow. And now I have these 3 kids who totally feel like I'm on their team. Like I just feel so lucky that they call me with their highs and lows and for advice. And, you know, like that's what I kind of wanted to end up with. It wasn't like smart kids or rich kids or like married kids with happily with a picket fence. I just wanted my kids to not feel like I ruined their lives, you know? And that's, to me, that was success.
That's a nice follow-up question, partially because, again, I'm a new mom, my oldest is 4.5, is how do you navigate that line of like, yes, let your kid do what they want, but at the same time, you are their parent. So for example, like, you know, like screens, which everybody's like, screens! And it's like, yeah, you know, they can watch TV 12 hours a day. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I know my child shouldn't really watch that much because no matter how much she watches, her attitude is crap afterwards. And it's utter disrespectful, whatever. And I'm just like, okay, how do I navigate that? You can do what you want, but at the same time, it's like, but I am the parent. Like, I'm not their buddy.
Well, we talked about this a little bit earlier when Jerry was here. He brought that same kind of question up where a lot of times people sort of go overboard in the unlearning sort of this authoritarian kind of position to like the kid is now the authority. And I think that the trick is that you're in a partnership, that you actually matter at home. Like what my sort of measurement, like when I started, for people who weren't here in the beginning, when I first started unschooling, I didn't know, I thought I had invented it, or I had called something called happiness homeschooling, where every morning we had a little cuddle on the couch. The whole thing was like, what does everyone need to be happy? But that means that there's like 4 of us, because I was a single mom, but then there was 3 other kids. So 4 people, like how do 4 people be happy? Not just how do the kids be happy and I do whatever they want me to, you know? But it's also not like I know better and so you guys all have to do what I say. But it's like I'm a person too, and if the screen for whatever, and I'm probably the most broken person in this family, you know, like I'm the oldest, I've dealt with the most shit. So I'm the most broken and fragile in a way. I have the most weird ideas of all of us. So yeah, maybe I have this weird idea that we're all gonna, like, our brains are gonna explode from watching too much TV, but I'm part of the family. I have this weird idea about TV, and so I can only handle so much TV because I'm part of this family. So just, or whatever the negotiate, and it's tricky. The more kids you have, and the more everyone has their own quirky, you know, like, some of us are more difficult to get along with than others. That's one of the things I was like, sorry, you only have me, and I'm not so great, but I am kind of the one who's holding this whole thing together. I'm the one who's making it so that you don't go off to truancy, you know. So like my vote counts too. And it helps to sort of look at it that way, not like, well, I am a little bit smarter than you, or I am the parent, so you do sort of have to say what I said, or I do kind of know better than you. It's just like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just giving you bad ideas, but I still can only do the best I can do. And if this is the best I can do, we just have to work with the best that I can do. Because I'm in this family and I'm kind of paying the bills and trying to keep us all from dying or going to jail or going to the loony bin. I always say, like, your first job as a parent is make sure they don't die. In very close seconds, make sure you don't go to the mental hospital. Because both of those things are just going to wreck the whole thing. You know? It's all over at that point. So once you make sure that those things aren't happening, then we can talk about strewing and life and all these other things. But you're not going to be a good unschooling parent from the mental hospital.
Can you talk to me a little more about bad attitudes and your reputation in the community? Like my son, I feel like has the most negative attitude and exudes it physically. And no matter what he does, if it involves other people, people look at him like, you know, that bad apple kind of.
Yeah.
And he's not. He's like really sweet, but when we get places, he's like, "Who sucks?" You know. And then like I feel like my whole reputation is in the homeschool community, but also outside of that is like really getting messed up.
I've been there. Yeah, I know. I know. I mean, I would. Again, back to sort of like, I'm just the person doing my best. It's like, can you guys do me a solid and make it seem like we're cool? You know, it's like, yeah, just like a little bit of like, we'll go a long way if you make grandma think that we're not complete losers, you know. And a lot of that just relies on them caring, giving any kind of rat's ass what I think in the first place. You know, like if they're like, yeah, well, screw you, you're an asshole, why do I want to make you look good? But it's like partly my kids at some point were sort of like, yeah, mom is kind of really put her neck out for us. We'll put our neck out for her a little bit now and then in public. But one thing is so I can mostly just say from my own experience, like, don't make him go anywhere that he doesn't want to go, because he's gonna have right? He's gonna have a bad attitude and make you look bad, right? Like, don't make him interact like he was sort of a jerk to his grandparents, so don't have him be around. Like, he obviously doesn't want to talk to them. It's not like doing anybody any good so don't make him interact with people he doesn't want to, don't make him do things he doesn't want to. And a lot of it is like just be like looking at, like, I would come up with my own little strategies, like talking to my parents or something is like, Jonathan's really been prolific in all his like art, like just try and present him to the world as like a good guy. Like, I don't have to be going around going, he's smoking. So that's part of it. Part of it is like just surviving through those hard times. We did have a lot of pep talks about like, all right, you can be mean to me, you can hate me, you can have a bad attitude, but like for the 2 days that we are at the conference, can you just, and if he says, forget it, I don't want to be nice when I'm at the conference, like find some way to not bring him to the conference. But if he gets like, this is a time when it would really help, it would help us not get arrested. Like, we don't want somebody to go call child services because I'm doing such a bad job, or we don't want dad, like I was divorced and their dad didn't like what we were doing. It's like, well, do you want dad to come swooping in and say, well, everyone has to go to school because we're doing such a bad job? Like, So there was some in it for them to kind of play along. But also, just I want to say about the bad attitude is like, let's just be real for a minute and say that teens, anybody, deserves to have a bad attitude. Like, this is a bullshit deal. Everything about this world, and especially I'm assuming your son is a teen of color, you know, it's just like, why should they be having a good attitude about any of this? And it's like, okay, yeah, it's hard for society to deal with the bad attitudes, but like, that shit makes way more sense than going around being like, isn't it nice? Aren't I lucky to be alive? Like, so I, especially now, I mean, at that time, that was one of, and again, putting a kind of good face on it, like, yeah, he's not really willing to pretend like society makes sense. Yeah, he's not really willing to pretend like it's fun to be told what to do and to not be allowed to drive because you're not old enough and to not have enough money to do the things you want. Like, he's not willing to pretend like that's really cool with him, you know? And just a lot of people don't want to deal with the truth. A lot of people don't want to see that. But to me, that actually, like, part of it was just honoring his bad attitude for me, and part of like surviving that time is like, sorry I brought you into this world. Like, you know, this is rough. And teenagers are in such a position where they're smart. They know it's not making any sense. But they're not old enough to like go off and become activists or to just get their own money or a car and get out of town. They're not little enough where they can just kind of be oblivious. And so anyone who doesn't have a bad attitude when they're a teenager, you kind of got to wonder if they're really being honest in a way. So that's underneath the whole thing. It's like, really, I wanted my teenagers to feel like I was on their side and not taking the world side. Like, no, come on, you're not supposed to make us so uncomfortable. You're like, yeah, this is kind of hard. Well, I think we're supposed to be done. I don't remember when this is supposed to be over. It's 1:15. Okay, I'm over.